Another draft science presentation. I think so anyway. See how it goes. Comments, but there isn't much. So I guess we'll do a little of this Puro thing. It's pretty inane and stupid. I won't bother playing the whole video because it's just stupid. So he makes a video basically stating that nothing is something. So space is something. So he says space is totally a thing. So we're not allowed to describe anything as a nothing. Everything has to be a something. So there's no such thing as nothing. Because obviously I could take somethings, I could make a box. And because I can make a box with nothing in it, the nothing must be something because I made a box. I mean, that's essentially his argument. And it's a stupid argument. I think it's perfectly rational to have a word describing the absence of something. The absence of material hard bodies can be separated by something that's different. We have an atmosphere that we consider almost nothing, but it's clearly something. It pressurizes like water, and it has layers and is different. But we consider it almost like a nothing because it's so different than the somethings swimming around in the atmosphere. But clearly, if you're going to make an explicit argument, the explicit argument would be in space. There is the something bits, the stuff that has momentum, and the stuff that can receive momentum, that is, be changed through interaction. And then there's this empty space between them, and it's empty space. It's nothing. It's not something. Because we gave it a name doesn't make it a something. Because we say we're making a distinction between the two somethings we separated. So in pure semantics, I'm not allowed to create a universe, logically, where there was something and nothing. And I could take two somethings and just separate them. And somehow, because I separated them, I created a something between them. The nothing between them is something. It's that kind of silly argument. So when he attempts to make this a dimensional argument, as if space has the properties of dimensions, when clearly the matter has the properties of dimensions. The matter has the liberty to move in 3 dimensions. It's perfectly reasonable to imagine a flat universe in which only 2 dimensions, matter can only move in 2. There might be matter, actually. There might be things in the universe that can only move in 2 dimensions. So they're the things that have the property of dimensionality, that is, the capacity to move in 3 dimensions, the liberty to do so. The space doesn't give them that property. It's something they have, and he's just declaring it so. That space makes the 3 dimensions, when, no, the matter makes the 3 dimensions by having the ability to move in the 3 dimensions. Just a disgusting semantics argument to attempt to justify giving properties to nothing. And this is the same thing they did with the word matter when they called it dark matter. They said, they're creating something that really isn't matter. It has none of the properties of matter except for gravity. It creates gravity. So they're trying to turn into a something when clearly it's a nothing. I mean, clearly it doesn't have any of the consequences of being something, which is having properties, a list of properties, a bunch of properties. Some things don't have just one property. So this is just such a weaselly perversion of language to play this game, to, in a sense, rationalize just complete bullshit explanations of phenomenon. The empty space did it. Geometry did it. Magic made the planets move. It's just because they have a garbage explanation, and they're attempting to rationalize it by pretending that there's some rational obligation to give nothing properties, when whatever properties a nothing ever has, it only acquires by comparison to a something. It has no innate properties. The somethings have properties. The nothing doesn't have any properties.
that sense if they have a material thing, a real physical thing. An idea also is a thing, but I'm not.
An idea is a thing. Well, it's not a thing in the sense that you can think of it as all kinds of, you can dress it in all kinds of clothes, so to speak. That is, you can use all kinds of language to describe what an idea is. But as a thing, the idea is really just electricity between neural connections. So it's pathways in a brain. That's what an idea is. It's not, it can be confined to a certain number of my brain cells. You could kill my brain cells one by one and figure out which ones are killing ideas and which ones aren't. So you could have one idea and preserve it by only killing the brain cells that have nothing to do with composing that idea. But the idea is a bunch of neural connections. That's the only something it is. Its somethingness, okay, is that stuff. Just as my somethingness isn't atoms, it's the electrons and the protons that make the atoms. That's my somethingness. My core is made out of something, just like the sponge or the fish or anything. It's made out of something more elemental.
No, it's a real physical thing, space. And the argument for...
So space is a real physical thing. No, it isn't. It's absolutely the opposite of a physical thing. It's not a physical thing. It's not a material thing. It doesn't have momentum. It doesn't have any of the characteristics of material things. It can't transfer anything. It can't... it doesn't do anything. It has no participation role.
There's a million arguments. The one I'm going to use right now is simple.
There's not a million arguments. And every one of them is silly. There's just a silly rationalization, a silly combining of words to justify breaking basic vocabulary. The word was invented to describe nothing. It wasn't invented to describe something. The intent of the word is being mocked, and the practical fact that we need a word for zero. So it's in a sense he's saying zero is something in mathematics, when clearly it's invented to represent nothing.
Is space two-dimensional?
Space is non-dimensional. The matter has dimensionality. The matter has the ability to move one way or another way. You could argue that cars are restricted. They're two-dimensional. They can turn left and they can turn right. They can go forward, they can go back. They can't really go up and down. Does that mean the atmosphere is only two-dimensional because cars are only two-dimensional? No, of course it doesn't.
Space four-dimensional? No, space is three-dimensional.
So space doesn't have any dimensions. The matter has dimensionality. The matter has the capacity to move. It's the thing creating the box. What's inside the box is irrelevant.
Throw in these other dimensions and call time, but you know what I mean.
No, I don't know what you mean. Time is not a dimension. Time is just a silly little function. It clearly has nothing. Time has nothing in common with up, down, left, right, forward, back. Nothing in common.
There's left, right, forward, back, and up and down. Reorient, there's still three spatial dimensions.
Yeah, they're spatial. It's just a word, okay? It's just a phrase of language. It's a little bit of poetry. But there are no dimensions of space. There's only dimensions created by material objects moving in the dimensions. The dimensions actually don't exist, right? I mean, it's arbitrary what we call forward, backward, left, right, up, down. Okay, it just depends on your perspective which label we give those things. So the real point is we all have spherical function. We exist with a capacity to move in any vector. Okay, but it's really not. The dimensions are something we're imposing in terms of making a distinction between the 180 degrees going forward and the 180 degrees going backward. We're making those distinctions. Those distinctions don't exist as reality.
Four, not two. If there's a fourth dimension, it's a different style. If there's just two dimensions.
Yeah, so says you again. So he's just telling us now what dimensions are as if he knows what they are. It's nonsense. No reason to believe in them, no evidence supporting their existence. It's just a pipe dream, just baby talk. about magical worlds that could possibly exist in magical scenarios, all in places we can't access with something called evidence. So they can just make up any story they want because we can't prove it ludicrous, even though we can make a rational argument that it's clearly made up nonsense.
But somehow 3 dimensions is encoded in. There's 3 dimensions in space. Now, why appear?
No, there's 3 dimensions that matter can move in. So, again, just because past language was sloppy and inexplicit doesn't give you license to create this magic. So, yeah, we still have a word called spontaneous in our vocabulary. Anybody with any kind of scientific knowledge knows it's not a real word. The stuff doesn't happen spontaneously. Everything's cause and effect. So, yeah, we can play with the word, but it doesn't really mean anything. It's not a real word. And spatial dimensions is just a way of saying, describing the dimensionality of different objects in different locations. But it's not the space that created the dimensions.
It appears that there's 3, and maybe there's various ways, but it appears that there's 3 dimensions of space. It doesn't appear there's 4. It doesn't appear there's anything. Now, how many dimensions are there in nothing? There's no dimensions in nothing.
Right, exactly. If there's nothing to be in the dimensions. But clearly, if I make something, the something can move in any one of the 3 dimensions. So again, the something is what's creating the dimensionality. The nothing doesn't create any.
There's nothing in nothing. Therefore,
they're including dimensions. There's no dimension. So you can't say space makes 3 dimensions when you have no something to create the border or the box. Again, the box doesn't force something to be inside the box. It's just nonsense to say the box can't exist without the nothing inside the box. That's stupid.
Since space does have 3 dimensions, it is a thing.
Okay, so again, he's trying to make it into something even though it's just the white space. You know, it's not a something. It's not providing the medium. Okay, it's not necessary. The something is the thing that is creating the necessary. It's the thing that's creating dimensionality. It's creating distance. It's creating all the functions. There's no functions without it, without the something. The nothing has none.
It takes up space. That's all it does. Well, not according to quantum mechanics. It also has vacuum energy associated with it, and therefore the so-called quantum.
Yeah, it's the so-called virtual energy, the vacuum energy, the bent disk, the fake sources of function. The made up, not real, not explicitly stated, the unexplained, the projected, just complete rubbish. The vacuum space, again, vacuum energy. It's not physics. It's not an explanation. It's the placeholder for an explanation. It's a cop-out. You might as well just talk about Easter rabbits and Santa Claus. You're just making up fake labels for I don't know. Instead of saying the honest thing, I don't understand, I don't know, you pretend to know by giving it a fake label. Vacuum energy.
But whatever, even if none of that is real, it still takes up space.
Well, it doesn't take up space. It doesn't replace nothing with nothing. It's just nonsense. It's a nothing. The somethings are something. The nothings are nothing. And it's a perfectly reasonable way to understand reality.
Foot by foot by foot is a volume of space. And if there was possible for there to be nothing...
And so again, foot by foot, measured with no feet. Measured by no substance, defined by no box, no shape, no container. Impossible to measure. You can't measure the distance, you can't measure anything without a something existing. The something is what gives space properties. The nothing can't give it any properties. Nothing can't have a property.
In it, then it would still be a volume of space with the quality of taking up a volume.
It wouldn't be taking up anything because it couldn't be in any container. You couldn't measure it. You couldn't weigh it. You couldn't do anything without a something to do it on, a something to compare it to. And the something is essential to the nothing having any shape or form. Fact.
And the quality of being able to contain other objects, other things rather, other types of things. So obviously, nobody is going to be able to say space is nothing.
Yes, they are, and they're the reasonable people. And the rest of you are just playing a game, stealing a word that we already have a label for. We already have a definition for it. Now, if you wish to say there is nothing in the universe, fine. Then be honest and say, I believe in ether. I believe in something having properties that takes the place of nothing. Be honest, but don't pretend nothing has dimensions. Don't pretend nothing has properties. It's just lying.
And still say that it's three-dimensional. Three-dimensional are inalienable,
Are drunk. Whatever. Okay, so you want to say that we can't separate the word nothing from three dimensions? It's just bullshit. Of course we can. There's nothing obligating us, nothing obligating any rational person to accept your proclamation that the nothing is what gave space its properties, when there's the perfectly reasonable explanation that no, the bits of something are the things that have the mobility. They're the things that decide where and what dimensions movement is possibly manifested in. All right, enough. It's just redundant. It's just a bullshit. Playing with words, and that's all these modern physics does, is play with words. Annihilation is an annihilation. Things are virtual energy. Things are bent nothings. We convert matter into bent space. All kinds of just nonsense. And this is all they have, is nonsense explanations, a litany of them. And they have these pathetic rationalizations for this abuse of perfectly sensible vocabulary. They want to steal the meaning of words to pretend they've accounted for something when they haven't. They don't account for the energy for gravity, and they don't account for the energy for magnetism, and they just throw these stupid words at you, bent space and virtual and vacuum energy, and pretend they answered the question when they answered nothing. All right. Comments. Not much. Let's see. Wouldn't mind seeing you take on Galen Windsor YouTube stuff. So again, another undefined reference to why. You wouldn't mind seeing what? A guy who pretends that it's okay to eat uranium. Try to make a point. Now, and he tries to make a point in a circumstance probably before Fukushima. Anybody after Fukushima defending nuclear power, that's a real uphill battle, right? Because, frankly, it just seems like it's inevitable that if we allow this technology and we give it to capitalists, they'll always cut a corner. And eventually it'll blow up, and then the public is stuck having to clean it up. And so it's never going to be cost effective when you add in the 10-year meltdown costs. So if we can make it and do it right, fine, but we can't so far. So again, what do you want me to have? He doesn't have any theory of reality. So why do you want me to have an argument with somebody who's just talking shit, pretending that the equation is as simple as what technology could yield the most energy for the least expense? Well, of course it would be nuclear energy. But that question that has a context, and the context is nuclear energy has to be handled carefully, and clearly we're not careful enough. So what's the point of having the conversation? But I really hate these unreferenced comments. It's just useless. I'm supposed to, and there's more than one Galen Windsor out there, so I mean, it just doesn't do you much good. So thanks, but no thanks. All right. So the Optimum Institute guy again. I don't see there's much point in the conversation, but whatever. Someone linked this to your video. A few things. You are right about the charges needing to be opposite. This was corrected this evening in our model. No change was made to the optimum equation, only to the visual layers that represent vectors. Yeah, well, your equation is so simple that what's the point of changing anything? The positive vectors were pointing in the wrong direction. Well, whatever. They were pointing towards greatest resistance. However, positive energy flows towards least resistance. There's no such thing as positive energy. There is, in fact, something called charge, which just means proton and electron. You don't have to even label them positive and negative. You could just understand that they are opposite in terms of their reciprocals of each other. And the one force affects the electrons, the other force affects the protons, and they do it in an inverse manner. And that's polarization, and that's the nature of the universe. That's the fundamental force. Making this correction clearly shows the classic electromagnetic field lines. It doesn't do any such thing, but whatever, keep daydreaming. And like charges do not attract through their Coulomb barrier, only opposite charges attract through that barrier. There's no barrier, and there clearly could be a truth that charge, once the two charges are close enough to each other, they could become attractive. That may be a rule, but you're not demonstrating it or proving it with anything called evidence, so what's the point? According to optimum theory, whatever that is, planets attract even though they are like charge. Well, then that's a stupid theory. Frankly, they're not charged. There's no evidence they have charge. Certainly not charged significant enough to create any motion in the entire mass of the body. So this is all just baby talk in the sense that you're not accounting for anything. You can't use the word charge and say it moves the whole planet. It's just nonsense. Because they are averaged towards each other. This averaging idea is just more bullshit. That's not the way charge works. Think of it this way. No, I won't do that. Imagine you have the number line from 10 to minus 10. The two identical planets on each end of the number line. Well, that would make them opposite charges. If they're on opposite ends of the number line, then one would be a negative 10 would be an electron. Positive 10 would be a proton. So that doesn't make any sense. You said they're like charges. Where the average is, where's the average? It's 0. Yeah, so what? Tug of war, balanced number, 10 people, they weigh the same, the stalemate for 2 hours. This manifests in optimum automation, whatever. Charge does not exist in optimum model. Well, then it's just a stupid model. I'm just saying that the evidence of charge is preposterously voluminous. You can't have a theory that unifies anything if you haven't accounted for charge. It's just useless mush. Because optimum theory asserts that all reality is a perfect fluid. Well, you can assert anything you want. There's just no evidence it's a perfect fluid. And why would a fluid change all the charge manifestations? Charge is a real property. Electrons, protons have these real properties. You have to account for their existence. What we think of as charge is just outward positive or inward negative pressure. Well, it's just nonsense because the negative pressure is positive to the oppositely charged body. So it's just nonsense conversation. Electrons only repel electrons. Protons only repel protons. There's rules to charge. Oh, whatever. Could you make a video about this mess? So another unstated, I mean, you're just going to throw me to blind links. So I'm supposed to go to the blind link and then find out, oh, it's a cartoon. It's nonsense. It's some idiot talking about how he's invented, the urine milkshake wonder, cure for cancer. I mean, it's just stupid. I mean, I don't appreciate the lack of effort of just posting fucking what could be a complete rubbish video that you're going to waste my time going to. 2 minutes and 39 seconds. Great.
And I have an identity that you might categorize as intersectional. I'm British Iraqi.
Who cares? So again, why are you wasting my time with this? Oy. See, I mean, it's just, ooh. That's why, if you're going to post anonymous links, I'm likely going to attempt to ignore them. Because it's often just a way of wasting people's time. I really hate people. Anyway, so there's really nothing else to comment on, I think. It's just kind of internet's gotten pretty dull. The dissident science guy did make another video. He's doing all these scripted videos now, and it's just all the same crap we've already heard 600 times. And sorry, I don't see any value in this. We have 10,000 free-thinking great minds working on this problem, and you really don't. You have a bunch of lunatics who, again, aren't paying any attention to the physical evidence and just making up crap about, and it's crappier than the crap the conventional physics have made up. I mean, who wants a crappier theory? And they're crappier. Which sort of fits with Bill Gates, because, you know, frankly, rope theory is crappier. I mean, it's just silly. Oh yeah, let's tie everything together with ropes that weigh more than the photons. Yeah, just fuck. That's stupid. So the ether and the barometer, I don't know where he's going with that, but it's probably not worth the trouble. I like him. I mean, I like the way he talks. I like a lot of his critiques of conventional physics. But, you know, as soon as he starts defending his own ideas, what's the point? It's just made up shit. There's just no evidence of ropes. There's certainly no evidence that, you know, of what the consequences would be. No accounting for the absence of the fact that we somehow can't find the ropes. I mean, that part just doesn't make any sense. Alright, so we'll just leave it at that short video. I don't actually think there was anything in the spam folder. So, quiet day for a change. Alright, so, till the next time, and such. Yeah.